What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. Live show week, draft guide is next week, draft is the week after. We're hitting it from every angle. CR, I know at this time of the year you are locked away in a cave, finishing the draft guide, breaking down tape, and finishing your mock drafts. But how you doing? How you feeling?
I've lost officially all reflection points of being a human being to the point where, to pull back the curtain, I was sitting there, Nick game on, laptop open, grinding through as many day 3 and UDFA players as I can. And I see my phone light up, and I've been kind of in and out on my phone even during this time because I would just never get anything done. And it's from you, and I'm like, and I look at the clock and it's 8:14, and we were set to record at 8 like we usually do most of the time. And I'm like, oh man, that's a really bad sign. I never on a Tuesday just completely lose track of what time it is or forget that we're recording Badlands. So we're in real caveman hours right now, but it'll all get done. It'll all be fun. But yeah, we're slowly teetering on the lines of insanity.
Yeah, I almost was going to make a health check call into your wife because we've been podcasting together for about 14 years and you've never been late or never missed a time before. I was like, oh my God, I hope he's okay. What are we going to do for Friday if he's not okay?
It was pretty rare air, especially 2 days before the event. Not great. All is well. I'm fine.
We're here. Let's talk. We'll start at the top. We're going to be very, very draft heavy across the pod and War Room tonight. We have about a gazillion questions. We're going to hit as many as we can, mostly in War Room, but enough of them are relevant to what we're going to talk about in the pod to hit here too. I want to take a bigger step back temperature check because we're getting into a little bit of silly season, especially at the top of the draft. Or maybe it's not silly season because this feels like it's going to be a pretty unpredictable year. As it sits right now, how do you see the top 7, because that's where Jet fans are going to be most interested, generally shaking out with the latest wave of rumors, chatter, workout? What are we looking at when Jet fans are sitting on pins and needles waiting for those first 6 picks to rip by?
Yeah, it's going to be, I think it feels like it's going to be chalk, but then you never really know. So I'll tell you what the wild cards are. We feel like Cam Ward's going number 1 overall. And then in some combo, 2 and 3 is going to be Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. And it feels like if you follow the markets, it's leaning Hunter and then Carter. I'm fascinated with the Giants already having 2 edge rushers. Do they take Carter because should be better than those guys, and they trade Thibodeau? Do they trade the pick? We'll see. It feels like the draft starts at 4 with New England, and New England can take about 10 different guys, from the favorite, which is Will Campbell, because they need an offensive lineman. They need a couple, to Ashton Genty, to Jalen Walker, to Tyler Warren. You could just go down the board. It feels like they're going to go offensive line. I've also heard, and I've said this on the pod already, I've heard for a while New England would love to trade this pick if Carter and Hunter are gone. But who's coming into 4 for what? The whole point to trade is for Cam Ward or the 2 best players in the draft, and those guys are gone. So we'll stay chalk here and say they do take Will Campbell just because they're so desperate to get better offensive line help in front of Drake May. Jacksonville, I would set the favorite at Mason Graham. I would say the runner-up is a pretty big board, including Jalen Walker, Ashton Genty. I wouldn't call it a non-zero chance for both them and New England to take Membu, honestly. There is a non-zero chance that Membu goes in one of those 2 picks, but not likely. Vegas at 6, a hot spot for Genty, a hot spot for Mason Graham, probably the starting point for Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan. So then you get to the Jets at 7. It feels like if you ran 100 simulations, Membu would be there 90 times, maybe more, which is really good situation for the Jets.
Yep.
It feels like Tyler Warren would be there 80 to 90 times, which obviously is a really good situation for the Jets. You get some dark horse, say there is a world where New England took Membu and Jacksonville took Warren and the Raiders take Graham and say the Jets don't think Campbell's a tackle. We've already talked about, like, do they take Banks? But these are really, really small percentiles. Are we overlooking defense entirely? I just think that the Jets need the 7th overall pick to be a part of their offense this year. There's things I like about, I really like Mike Green's game. There's things to like about Jalen Walker. There's things to like about these guys, but they have glaring holes on the offense right now. So no matter how many times you go through it, it feels like over and over again, M'Boue at 7 is the high percentile outcome.
I think that sounds what like most Jet fans are expecting. Now
They
today there
Warren,
was,
but
yeah, it sounds like there's like this, like there's been a recent wave of, I would say, Jalen Walker and Stewart chatter due to a couple different projections. More so Walker, especially now that there's rumors that Pats could be interested in him at 4, which I think if you're a Jet fan, you're rooting like crazy for that to be the pick.
Yeah,
4, definitely. Or Campbell, I think, as a fallback, because I don't know if the Jets are going to be comfortable taking him at 7, although you can make a case that, maybe it ends up being a reasonable pick, although it just doesn't feel like the right fit this year. So if the Jets get to a spot where they're going to get to pick between M'Boue or Warren, I think most fans should be pretty damn happy with that, because I think most fans, you could see the case for both. I find it hard to be like, God, I hate one of those 2 picks. You can make a compelling argument either direction for those 2 guys, and I'm not trying to play both sides like the Always Sunny gif.
Yeah.
I won't be unhappy with either of those picks. I do feel really strongly, unless it's Mason Graham, who I really don't think will be there, you need to go offense, because I was joking about it in the Discord. You coming out on 3rd and 7 with Chugs at right tackle and flexing out Stone Smart into the big slot and Tyler Johnson as your X with Garrett Wilson triple teamed is kind of terrifying. And you need an immediate blue chip potential starter on offense. I know these guys might not be blue chip year 1, but man, you get M'Boue, you're like, man, we might have one of the 8 or 9 best offensive lines in football this year if everything breaks right. Like we got the talent to do it. We're young. You get Warren, you're like, all right, we have a legit number 2 pass catcher now. We're going to be better run blocking, and we're going to have help for whatever the right tackle solution ends up being, which is probably a day 2 or day 3 pick, and then maybe a veteran right before camp. So you just leave feeling better. Now you get Graham, it's like, all right, like he's one of the 3 best players in the draft, 4 best players in the draft. Him and Quinnen are going to be game wreckers up front. And now I think how do you be really aggressive in rounds 2 and 3 with offense? Do you even try to get up and get more picks in that concentration so you can get 3 bites at the apple?
The trade for Goddard,
like something like that. Yeah, that's a good one. Like where if you just miss on tight end early, Goddard, Kyle Pitts, Meyer, can you go trade for one of those 3? Can you give up a 4th or 5th? I think then you got to go get a plug and play guy, and you feel okay if Rucker and Smart are your 2 and 3, and you have a proven starter if you get one of those 3 guys who are capable of playing every down. I just feel with Walker, it just feels like a stretch for me right now about what you're going to get out of him, where you're going to play him in this defense. Same with Stewart.
How many linebackers do they need?
I can't talk myself into it. And we gradually talked ourselves into Will McDonald, but that was a little bit of a different situation for the Jets, like as an org, where that was so surprising in the moment. But I have a hard time convincing myself on defense.
McDonald was the all-time sack leader, tied with Von Miller from the Big 12. Shamar Stewart, for as gifted as he is a not project. That's not the word you're looking for, but is a bigger projection, like way bigger projection. That's the difference, I think, there. And Will McDonald was not a top 10 pick in the NFL draft.
Yep. All right. I want to start poking on some of these questions because I think there was a lot of there seems to be a lot of stress among Jet fans that we're going to get this sort of wild card pick. And a lot of it is sort of centered around the Genty talk, which we'll talk about more towards the end of the pod. But I think today it feels more about the defensive players. So we got a question from Alex where if the Jets were to take an edge at pick 7, which would be a horrible idea to me, what does it say about this regime's feelings about the Will McDonald pick? Was it the point of taking him in that we were set at edge with him and JJ moving forward? Not to mention we also have way more pressing needs. I think sort of a bigger thought of what I'd like to hear you kind of speak on a little bit as well is how is Will McDonald and JJ going to fit into this defense? How are they going to be used? They're very different players. I think we know Glenn has a history with JJ, and I think once he's healthy and right, I think he's going to be a core leader for this team going forward. But you've mentioned, we've talked a little bit about defense. Like, how do you think they're thinking about their edge group right now, which is light because they don't have a third edge rusher at all. Obviously we're not going to talk Clemens, but what do you think of that question overall?
I think it's interesting. I think I kind of sit on both sides where I wouldn't take an edge, by the way, in that spot. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a road back for JJ. Like, It's not week one. He's not going to look like Jermaine Johnson. Maybe he proves us wrong, but an Achilles is an Achilles. And Achilles for an edge player it's tough. It's going to take a little while. Then you wonder, how do they use McDonald? Do they view him, and they're not similar players, but with the wider alignment, do they try to make him their Hutchinson and have him in these island matchups? Do they not like that kind of player? I would be really disappointed if they just, went into it like, it's not our type of edge or anything like that. And I'd be surprised. That'd be really odd. So it feels like, here's the thing when it comes down to it, when you just kind of look at it from a logical sense. When you get to a place, there are areas that, one, are weak spots and you have needs. There are areas that are strengths, and you've watched enough tape and the player well enough from connections and talking to the player that you feel comfortable with. Like, that's Garrett Wilson is that spot. Sauce Gardner, even for his down points last year, is more on the lines of that spot. The weaknesses, they don't have a tight end on the roster, right? They don't have really a starting right tackle. They need another starting safety. They need a defensive tackle next to Quinnen. But that's why they just, you let Kinlaw walk. You let those guys walk. But then there's something in the middle. And something in the middle is more, I need to get in, run a training camp, implement a scheme, and see if guys sink or swim. And there's a lot of guys on that bubble right now that are good players, but that I'm sure Aaron Glenn is looking at and going, there's some things I need to see. I bet Breece Hall is one of those players. I'm going to name the good ones because there's obvious ones, right? There's definitely some guys where you look at it and go, like Tony Adams is probably projected today to start at safety. I think Tony Adams will be given a chance to prove that he can hang on to this roster and be a third safety or whatever it is, but you get the point. But the good players, Breece Hall, Will McDonald, I mean, there's a world where Quincy is kind of in that because it's a new scheme and he's due to get paid after this year.
Yep.
And they're going to have to figure out if they want to pay him. So there are some players in those spots and Malachi Corley is a player that we have no expectations at all.
1.5 or whatever we tweeted the other day.
Yeah. Season 1.5. Yeah. When you're the Jets, though, you're probably looking at it like, can this guy be our number 4? Yeah. Gadget plays, screens, obviously 4 wide receiver sets, because that's a spot we don't want to have to draft again. Yeah. Like laugh all we want, and we do laugh because we have zero expectations for someone like that. But this regime didn't draft Malachi Corley, didn't trade up in the 3rd round to get him. They are just trying to solve roster spots so they don't have to address them immediately. So taking an edge player to me would fall into that bracket where you didn't have to do that. Maybe you need to next year. Maybe Jermaine doesn't look right off the Achilles. Maybe Will McDonald takes a huge step back in a different scheme. I hope they don't, and I don't think they will. But those are things you want to see and then figure out later. You can't go into this year without a surefire right tackle. You can't go into this year without a real tight end. Like, those are non-negotiables throughout the draft, in a draft where you don't have a million picks. So that's my problem with the idea of being open to taking an edge at 7. You haven't earned the right to be open to that right now. Yeah. You haven't. You got work to do in other areas. Then you could address those.
Quick reminder before we move on to the next part of the pod. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to see the full episode, either become a member on our YouTube channel, but easier, just go to patreon.com/BadlandsTOJ because we have a ton more episodes that don't hit YouTube, articles, film breakdowns, and plenty more. So for the full episodes, and we know these abruptly cut sometime on YouTube, patreon.com/BadlandsTOJ. All right.